Get your hands where I can see them. The shout cracked through the fluorescent air of the supermarket, slicing straight into Marcus Hale's concentration. For a moment, everything froze. The woman he'd been tailing, the crowd near the produce section, even the low hum of shopping carts. The man barking orders was Officer Derek Lawson, his hand already hovering near his holster, eyes burning with suspicion, and the target, Lila Moreno. The money launderer Marcus had tracked for 9 long months, glanced up just long enough to recognize the chaos she needed. Then, like smoke, she vanished through the exit doors. Before we go into this story, take a second, tell me where you're watching from, subscribe to the channel, and hit that like button, because what happens next is one of those moments that changes everything. Marcus didn't move at first. He'd seen this before. The disbelief in a white officer's eyes when confronted with a black man in plain clothes, calm but commanding. He raised his hands slowly, keeping his voice measured. "Agent Marcus Hale, FBI," he said, pulling his badge from his pocket with deliberate care. "I'm on an operation. You're compromising it." Derek's jaw tightened, his fingers brushing the metal of his gun. "You expect me to believe that? In a hoodie and sneakers? Don't move, or I'll put you down right here, around them." Shoppers began pulling out their phones. One voice whispered, "Is he really FBI?" Another, more cynical, muttered, "Yeah, right. That's what they all say." The tension thickened with every passing second. Marcus's earpiece buzzed faintly. Elena Vargas, his partner, was listening from the surveillance van outside. Her voice was calm but urgent. "Marcus, stand down. Don't escalate. I'm coming in." He wanted to shout back that he wasn't the one escalating, but he bit his tongue. Years of restraint had taught him that sometimes silence was the only shield. Derek's face was a mixture of authority and insecurity, the kind that came from too many years of chasing small-time criminals and never being tested on something bigger. He'd just argued with his wife over the phone, her voice still echoing in his head. "You're never home. Derek. Maybe if you stopped pretending to be a hero." He was on edge, and Marcus, to him, looked like trouble wrapped in confidence. "Sir," Marcus said evenly, "you are interfering in an active federal operation. Step back and call your captain before you make this worse." Derek's laugh was harsh and defensive. "Don't tell me how to do my job." He gestured toward the floor with his weapon. "Down. Now." Marcus's pulse thudded, not from fear, but from the sick familiarity of it all. Years ago, before he joined the Bureau, he'd worn a badge of his own, city police, uniform pressed, boots polished. Back then, he'd watched his own partner, a man named Collins, drag a young black boy from a park bench simply for sitting in the wrong neighborhood. Marcus had tried to speak up. The department called it insubordination. He remembered the captain's words clearly. "Sometimes you just follow orders. Hale, don't make it about race." That day, he decided he'd work where orders couldn't bury the truth. Now, standing in front of Derek, he realized how little had changed. Different badge, same blindness. Elena's voice came through again. "I'm inside, near aisle 7. Don't move." Marcus caught her reflection in a convex mirror at the end of the aisle. Steady, sharp, determined. Derek hadn't seen her yet. "Last warning." Derek barked. "Down on the ground." Marcus didn't move. His voice dropped to something quieter, deeper. "Officer, if you do this, you'll regret it for the rest of your career." Derek's nostrils flared. "Is that a threat?" "No," Marcus said, eyes calm. "That's a fact." The moment stretched tight as wire. Then, a ripple of commotion. Elena stepped forward, badge in hand, tone sharp but composed. "FBI, lower your weapon. Officer, he's with me." Derek's face twitched, confusion breaking through his anger. "You've got to be kidding." But his gun wavered, then lowered slightly. The damage, however, was already done. By the time Derek realized his mistake, Lila Moreno's black sedan was rolling out of the parking lot unnoticed. She'd been waiting for the distraction, and now she had it, inside the car. She smirked to herself, scrolling through a burner phone. "Tell Navarro we're clean," she texted. "The cops just saved us 9 months of surveillance. Back inside." Elena confronted Derek. "You just blew a federal case," she said, her tone low but cutting. "Do you even understand what you've done?" Derek tried to defend himself, his words tumbling. He looked suspicious. "He looked like what?" Marcus snapped, for the first time. The anger broke through his restraint. "Like someone who didn't belong? Someone who didn't fit your idea of what law enforcement looks like?" The silence that followed was deafening. Customers still recording, whispers spreading. The scene was already being stitched together by dozens of lenses. In less than an hour, that footage would be on social media, and by morning, it would be everywhere. Elena pulled Marcus aside, her expression a mix of concern and exhaustion. "We'll regroup," she said softly. "We'll find her. But right now, we need to get out before this turns into a circus." Marcus nodded, but inside, something heavier settled in his chest, not anger, not even frustration, but a weary sadness that this, after all his years in the bureau, was still his reality. As they left the store, Derek stood near the registers, his mind spinning. He'd never seen an FBI badge that close before, never felt so small under the weight of his own assumptions. He caught sight of a teenage boy watching him, shaking his head. The look wasn't angry, it was disappointed. Somehow, that stung more than anything. Outside, the Houston dusk glowed faintly orange against the skyline. Marcus leaned on the hood of the bureau car, closing his eyes for a moment. His earpiece crackled again. Carla Bennett, his supervisor, sharp as ever. "Hale, report." He straightened his shoulders. "Operation compromised. Target escaped. Cause, local interference." There was a pause on the line. "Local interference?" she repeated. "You mean police?" "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. Inside the car, Elena drove in silence. Marcus stared out the window, watching neon lights blur past. "You handled that better than most would have," she finally said. He didn't respond right away. "Elena," he murmured, "you ever get tired of having to prove you belong? Every single day?" She looked at him, her voice soft. "Every day. In another part of the city." Lila Moreno parked her car behind a warehouse, her hands trembling as she deleted the app on her phone. She wasn't evil, just desperate. The money, the promises, the lies she'd told herself. All of it felt like quicksand now. She thought of her son, asleep somewhere safe with her sister, and whispered, "Just a little longer," and miles away. Officer Derek Lawson sat alone in his cruiser, lights off, hands gripping the wheel. The voice of his captain rang in his ear from the dispatch radio. "Lawson. What the hell happened out there?" He didn't answer, because for the first time, he wasn't sure. That night. The first video went online. Title, "White Cop Confronts Black FBI Agent." You won't believe what happens next. Within hours. Houston was buzzing. Within days. The world would be watching, and for everyone involved. Marcus, Derek, Lila. There was no turning back. The video spread faster than anyone could contain it. By morning, #HoustonSupermarket trended across every platform. People weren't just watching. They were angry, debating, demanding answers. Some defended Derek Lawson, saying he was just doing his job. Others saw what Marcus Hale had lived with for years, a black man forced to justify his existence even while protecting the country. But for Marcus, the noise outside didn't matter yet. He was focused on the one thing that did. Lila Moreno was gone, and every second she stayed free. Another part of his 9-month operation crumbled. inside the FBI field office. Marcus stood in front of a large monitor as footage replayed in slow motion. Derek's gun, the crowd's cell phones, the look of disbelief on Marcus's face, all captured in perfect clarity. Carla Bennett, their supervisor, watched with folded arms. 9 months of surveillance, hundreds of hours of undercover work. Gone in 2 minutes, she said sharply. Marcus didn't defend himself. He didn't need to. She turned to Elena Vargas. Agent Vargas, any visual on the suspect? Elena shook her head. She exited through the south door. Security footage shows her heading toward the parking lot. There's a partial license plate, but she switched vehicles less than 10 minutes later. Carla's jaw tightened. Then we start over. Find out who tipped her off. At the same time, in another corner of Houston. Officer Derek Lawson sat at his precinct desk, staring at the suspension notice glowing on his screen. Captain Victor Reyes stood behind him, arms crossed. "You realize what this looks like?" Reyes said, voice steady but cold. "You stopped an FBI agent mid-operation, on camera, during a federal case. The Bureau's filing a complaint." Derek swallowed hard. He didn't identify himself clearly. Reyes raised an eyebrow. "He did." "You didn't listen. There was no yelling, just quiet disappointment, which somehow cut deeper." "Take a few days," the captain added. "Stay off the streets. We'll review it." Derek didn't respond. He just shut the laptop and walked out, his badge feeling heavier than it ever had. Meanwhile, in a dim motel room on the edge of the city, Lila Moreno watched the same video on her phone. The glow reflected off her tired face, her eyes sharp but conflicted. She had once been invisible, a single mother surviving on expired coupons and government aid. Now she was the subject of a federal manhunt. "They think they can catch me?" she muttered, pacing near the window. Her phone buzzed with a message from an encrypted app. "Stay low. Navarro's got your back." She stared at it, uncertain. Sergeant Luis Navarro, a name she hadn't heard in months. He'd been her contact in the shadows, not by choice but by circumstance. He thought he was helping her get money for her son's treatment. She thought he was just another cop she could manipulate. In truth, they were both pawns in something larger, a network that stretched beyond Houston, funneling funds through fake EBT transactions and shell grocery chains across 4 states. Back at Grandway Supermarket, the scene of the chaos, security guard Mia Chen reviewed the store's camera feeds. She was young, sharp-eyed, and restless, the kind of person who still believed the system could be fixed. "Agent Vargas," she said when Elena arrived. "I think you need to see this." She zoomed in on one frame. Luis Navarro, chatting near the service exit 2 hours before the confrontation. His uniform didn't belong there. He wasn't assigned to this district. He said he was responding to a call. Mia added, "But there was no call logged." Elena's brows furrowed. "Send that to me." Mia hesitated. "If he's involved, this could get me in trouble." Elena placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing." As the evidence formed a new web, Marcus was still trying to calm the storm. Outside the Bureau building, reporters waited like vultures. He kept his head down, walking fast, ignoring the cameras. One journalist shouted, "Agent Hale, how does it feel to be profiled while on duty?" He didn't answer. The last thing he wanted was to turn this into a spectacle about race when it was supposed to be about justice. But the truth followed him like a shadow. He couldn't ignore it forever. That evening, Marcus and Elena met in a small conference room. She placed her tablet on the table, showing the footage Mia had sent. Luis Navarro. He was there. Marcus leaned forward, studying the image. "What's his connection to Lila?" "Unclear," Elena replied. "But he's been under stress lately. Gambling debts, disciplinary warnings. If Lila had a source inside law enforcement, it's him. Marcus rubbed his forehead. Which means she knew we were coming before we even walked in. At that moment, his phone buzzed. A notification from an unknown number. A single message appeared. You can't catch what's already gone. The sender's name was masked. But Marcus recognized the writing style. Lila. It wasn't a taunt, it was a warning. He handed the phone to Elena. She's playing games. Elena frowned. Or she's scared. Across town. Jordan Tate, the 22-year-old who'd filmed the confrontation, sat in his dorm room watching his video cross 1 million views. Comments flooded in. Praise, outrage, conspiracy theories. A local activist group reached out, asking him to speak at a community meeting. He hesitated. I didn't mean to start anything. He told his roommate, I just wanted people to see the truth. But once a story like that ignited, no one could control where it burned. By midnight, Captain Reyes called Carla Bennett directly. Their conversation was tense but professional. My officer made a mistake, Reyes admitted. He'll be disciplined. Carla's tone was clipped. Your officer compromised a federal case. Mistake is too soft a word. He's not a bad cop. Reyes insisted. Just a human one. There was silence on the line before Carla replied. Then maybe it's time humanity learned restraint. At 2 a.m., Lila parked outside a truck stop off Highway 90. She changed cars again, an old sedan with stolen plates, and ordered black coffee from a vending machine. She stared at her reflection in the glass window, exhaustion seeping through. Her son's voice echoed in her mind. Mom, when will this be over? Soon. Baby, she whispered. Soon. But deep down, she knew there was no going back. By dawn. The Bureau had traced one of her burner phones to a warehouse outside Houston. But when agents arrived, it was empty. Only a half-burned ledger remained, listing transactions across Texas, Louisiana, and Alabama, the skeleton of something much bigger than Lila alone. Meanwhile, Derek couldn't sleep. His wife had stopped answering his calls. He sat on the couch, replaying the video again and again, each time hoping to see something different. But there it was, his face twisted in anger, his voice echoing commands he no longer believed in. You expect me to believe that? He muttered to himself. The same words he'd shouted at Marcus. Only now. They sounded hollow. The next morning, Elena met Marcus at the Bureau garage. Navarro's agreed to talk. She said, but he's spooked. Marcus adjusted his holster, exhaustion visible in his eyes. Good. Maybe fear will get us somewhere. But before they could leave, another alert came through. Lila had messaged again. This time. It wasn't a threat. It was a video clip, footage of Marcus standing in the supermarket, hands raised, surrounded by strangers' stares. Her voice played over it, calm but chilling. You think you're better than me, Agent Hale? You hide behind your badge. I hide behind survival. The system created both of us. Marcus stared at the screen, his reflection merging with hers in the black glass. For the first time, he didn't know who was really being hunted, the criminal he chased, or the truth he'd been running from. The call came through just after dawn. We have a lead, Elena's voice said, sharp and steady through Marcus's earpiece. License plate partial match. Vehicle spotted heading north on I-45. Marcus was already in motion before she finished. Within minutes, he was behind the wheel of an unmarked SUV, the city unfolding in streaks of morning light and sirens. The Bureau's plan was simple. Intercept Lila Moreno before she crossed state lines. But nothing about this case had been simple from the moment Derek Lawson pulled his gun inside that supermarket. Now, Marcus was chasing not only a fugitive, but the ghost of a mistake that wouldn't stop haunting him. The radio chatter filled the silence between him and Elena, who sat in the passenger seat scanning the GPS feed. She switched vehicles again. She muttered, "Blue Honda Civic, stolen 2 hours ago, heading toward exit 62. Marcus tightened his grip on the wheel. That's toward the refinery strip. Too many trucks. She could disappear in seconds. He accelerated, cutting through lanes of traffic, the engine growling beneath his calm exterior. Every move was precise. Years of bureau training had honed him into something surgical, patient, deliberate, but beneath the calm, a different kind of heat built, frustration, the sting of losing control in front of that crowd, the image of Derek's raised gun flashing in his mind like a recurring nightmare. Meanwhile, miles ahead, Lila gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles went white. The car rattled with every gust of wind, and her reflection in the side mirror was almost unrecognizable, eyes sunken, hair matted, adrenaline her only fuel. On the passenger seat beside her sat a cheap prepaid phone, blinking with unread messages. She ignored them. She had one goal left: reach the man who promised safety. Evan Brooks, her last remaining ally, the hacker who'd once built the digital system that cleaned her dirty money. He'd turned on her before, but now she needed him again. Just one more chance, she whispered to herself. Then we disappear for good. Back in Houston. Derek Lawson sat alone in his apartment, watching the live news coverage. The video from the supermarket had now reached 10 million views. Talk shows debated whether he was a racist or a scapegoat. He muted the television and stared at the reflection in the dark screen. His badge lay on the table beside a half-empty glass of bourbon. His phone buzzed. It was Luis Navarro. "We need to talk." The message read. Derek hesitated. Luis had been distant lately, nervous, almost guilty. Something about that call unsettled him. He typed back. About what? No reply came. Instead, the news anchor's voice cut through the silence from the muted screen. Sources confirmed the fugitive. Lila Moreno may have had inside help from local law enforcement. Derek froze. The weight of the words pressed down on him. Inside help. Luis. Out on the highway. The chase intensified. Marcus's SUV weaved through the morning rush as Elena relayed updates from the Bureau's command center. "She's moving erratically, cutting between semis. Looks like she's trying to bait us." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "She's not just running. She's sending a message." "What kind of message?" Elena asked. "That she knows how far we'll go before breaking the rules." Lila suddenly slammed the brakes and veered across the divider, the Honda scraping against the guardrail in a shower of sparks. Marcus swerved hard to avoid collision, tires screaming against asphalt. The Bureau helicopter above called in coordinates, tracking her turn onto a service road leading toward an industrial area. "She's boxed in," Elena shouted. But Marcus knew better. Lila was too clever to corner herself. He pushed forward, heart pounding, the line between hunter and hunted blurring with every turn, through the cracked windshield of her car. Lila spotted an abandoned truck yard ahead, the perfect cover. She pulled in, ditched the car, and sprinted between rusted trailers. Her boots kicked up gravel as she darted behind a fuel tanker, breathing hard. She could hear the sirens closing in. For a moment, she pulled out her phone, recording a quick video message. "Agent Hale," she said, voice trembling but defiant. "I know you're coming, but before you do, ask yourself why this case exists. Who profits from all this? It's not me." She sent the file through an encrypted channel, tossed the phone into the dirt, and kept running. Minutes later, Marcus and Elena arrived, weapons drawn, eyes scanning the yard. "She's close," Marcus said quietly. Elena nodded. "Backup's 5 minutes out." Marcus gestured toward the fuel tanker. "Then we finish this before the cavalry shows up." They split off. Elena circling right, Marcus moving left along a row of containers. The air smelled of oil and dust. Somewhere ahead, a faint metallic clang echoed, the sound of a door slamming shut. Marcus followed it. Gun raised, steps slow and deliberate. He turned the corner and froze. Lila stood there, her gun lowered, tears streaking her face. "Don't," she said, voice breaking. "You don't understand." Marcus didn't flinch. "Put it down." She shook her head. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to steal? The people funding this? They wear suits. They own banks, charities. I just kept their money moving." Her eyes locked on his. "We're both working for systems that don't care who gets crushed." For a second, Marcus saw the exhaustion in her, the same weariness he carried, but duty overrode emotion. "It's over. Lila." She smiled sadly. "You still believe that?" And before he could respond, she fired a single shot. Not at him, but at a propane tank nearby. The explosion tore through the air, a blinding flash of fire and debris. Marcus dove for cover as heat scorched the side of his face. When the smoke cleared, she was gone. Hours later, back at the bureau, Marcus stood before Carla Bennett with soot still on his jacket. "She's in the wind again," Carla said grimly. "We'll issue a federal warrant across 4 states. She won't get far." Marcus didn't respond. He was staring at his reflection in the dark window, watching the faint city lights flicker. She said something. He murmured, "About the people behind her, about this system." Carla gave him a long look. "You think she's right?" He hesitated. "I think she's desperate, but desperation usually hides truth." Across town, Derek drove to an empty parking lot to meet Luis Navarro. The man looked pale, shaking, his uniform wrinkled. "I didn't mean to get anyone hurt." Luis said, "I thought she just needed information. Delivery routes, schedules. She paid me. That's all?" Derek clenched his fists. "You were feeding her bureau intel?" Luis nodded, eyes wet, indirectly. "Through a third party? I didn't know it'd go this far." Derek stared at him, disgusted. "You ruined a man's career, blew a federal case, and made every cop in Houston look dirty." Luis's voice cracked. "I was trying to fix my debts." Derek turned away, fury trembling in his voice. "You sold your soul for pocket change. That night." Marcus sat alone in his kitchen, his wife Sophia watching him quietly. "You're still thinking about her?" she said softly. He nodded. "Because she's not just a criminal. Soph, she's a symptom of something broken." She reached for his hand. "So fix it, but don't lose yourself trying." He managed a faint smile. "I'll try." Outside, Houston's skyline glowed against the night. Beautiful, distant, untouchable. Somewhere out there, Lila Moreno was still running, and Marcus Hale, weary but unyielding, knew this was no longer just a chase for justice. It was a fight for the truth behind it. The bureau conference room was silent, except for the faint hum of the projector on the screen. Evan Brooks's nervous face flickered into view through a video call. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days, hair messy, eyes darting side to side. "I want a deal," he said, voice trembling, "witness protection, reduced sentence, the whole package. I'll give you everything on Lila and the network." Marcus Hale leaned forward, jaw tight. "You don't get a deal until we verify what you've got. Start talking." Evan hesitated, glancing off screen as if someone were listening. The operation wasn't just about EBT fraud. He said, it was about laundering political donations through fake nonprofits. Houston was just one hub. Carla Bennett's expression didn't change, but her eyes darkened. "Names?" Evan shook his head. "Not over video. I'll meet in person. Tonight." The call ended abruptly, leaving the room thick with unease. Carla turned to Marcus and Elena. "Set it up. discreetly, and this time, no local interference. Meanwhile, in a small interrogation room across town, Sergeant Luis Navarro sat hunched over a table, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles blanched. Captain Victor Reyes stood across from him, arms crossed. "You've got one chance to explain," Reyes said. Luis's voice cracked. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. She said it was just data, shipment times, security schedules. I didn't know she was moving money through our department's systems." Reyes slammed a hand on the table. "You compromised a federal operation? You realize what that means?" Luis nodded weakly. "She paid for my son's surgery," he whispered. The room fell silent. Reyes exhaled slowly. "Get yourself a lawyer." "Luis, because you're not wearing that badge again." The news of Navarro's confession spread quietly through the department. But Derek Lawson heard it like thunder. Sitting in his car outside the precinct, he scrolled through messages from fellow officers, fragments of gossip and blame. Navarro's done. Reyes is furious. FBI's crawling all over us. Derek's hands shook on the steering wheel. He'd known Luis for 10 years, shared beers after shifts, trusted him like a brother. Now, that same man was the reason his name was being dragged through every headline. He slammed the steering wheel, the sound echoing through the empty parking lot. For the first time, the anger wasn't toward Marcus or the Bureau. It was toward himself, for not seeing it sooner. That evening, at a local community hall in South Houston, Reverend Isaac Moore stood before a crowd of citizens gathered under the glow of camera lights. The viral video of the supermarket confrontation had ignited something larger than anyone expected. "This isn't just about one officer," the Reverend said, his deep voice filling the room. "It's about a system that teaches fear before it teaches understanding. We demand accountability, not just apologies." The crowd erupted in applause, chants echoing through the hall. "Justice for Hale! Reform the force!" Among the attendees was Jordan Tate, the young man who had filmed the original video. He watched from the back, uneasy with the fame that had landed on his shoulders. After the meeting, a local reporter approached him. "You realize your video started this movement?" Jordan shook his head. "I didn't start anything. I just pressed record. The world did the rest." Back at the Bureau, Elena Vargas entered the office with new intel. "Evan's ready to meet at the truck stop on Highway 90, she said. Marcus glanced at the clock. 9:47 p.m. "Let's go," he replied. But Carla stopped him. "You'll have backup this time. I'm not risking another fiasco." Marcus wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. He also knew that backup meant paperwork, delays, and the kind of hesitation that let suspects slip away. Still, he nodded and headed for the door, while the agents prepared. Derek Lawson sat in a quiet therapy room across town. Dr. Amelia Foster, the police department's psychologist, sat across from him, calm and patient. "Why are you here?" "Derek?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "Because they told me to be." "That's not what I asked." He stared at the floor. "Because I messed up. Because I can't stop seeing that man's face, the look he gave me when I drew my weapon. I thought he was lying. I thought I was protecting people." Dr. Foster leaned forward. "And now?" Derek swallowed hard. "Now I realize I was protecting an image of what I thought a cop was supposed to be," my father used to say. "Don't hesitate. Don't trust anyone who doesn't look like you." I carried that voice into every stop, every call, and it nearly destroyed someone else's life. The room stayed silent as he wiped his eyes. "So why are you really here?" "Derek?" she asked again. "Because," he whispered, "I don't want to be that man anymore." Back on Highway 90, Marcus and Elena parked near the truck stop where Evan had agreed to meet. The night air was thick, the smell of diesel lingering. Trucks idled in the distance, their lights flickering like restless eyes. "We'll keep it quiet," Elena said, adjusting her earpiece. If he's telling the truth, this could expose the whole network. Marcus scanned the lot, or it could be a setup. They approached slowly, spotting Evan sitting at a booth inside the small diner, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. He looked terrified. "You came alone?" Marcus asked, sliding into the seat across from him. "Of course not," Evan said, eyes darting to the window. "They're watching." "Who?" Elena pressed. "The people you think are after Lila. She's not running from the Bureau, she's running from them." Before he could say more, a sharp pop echoed outside, the sound of a gunshot. Glass shattered. People screamed, and Evan slumped forward onto the table. Marcus drew his weapon, shouting, "Down!" As Elena dragged him to cover, a dark SUV peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching. Marcus sprinted outside, firing 2 shots at the fleeing vehicle, but it vanished into the highway darkness. He rushed back to Evan, who lay motionless, blood pooling beneath him. "He's gone," Elena whispered. Marcus clenched his fists. They silenced him. Later that night, the Bureau traced the SUV to a shell company connected to one of Lila's supposed charities, a front tied to offshore accounts. "This goes way beyond her," Carla said, staring at the evidence board filled with photos and red string. "She's not just a suspect anymore. She's a liability to whoever's really pulling the strings." The next morning, the media exploded again. Federal witness killed. During FBI meeting, protests outside the police headquarters doubled in size. Reverend Moore spoke live on television, his words calm but searing. "If justice can be silenced that easily, then none of us are safe." At home, Derek watched the broadcast with a heavy heart. His phone buzzed, a message from Luis Navarro, sent before his arrest. "Tell Hale I'm sorry. She used us both." Derek stared at it for a long time, the words sinking in like stones. He looked out the window toward the morning sky, uncertain if redemption was still possible for him. At the Bureau, Marcus stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall outside the briefing room. Elena approached quietly. "You okay?" she asked. He exhaled slowly. "No, but I can't stop now." She nodded. "Then we finish it. Behind them, on a monitor in the command center, new footage surfaced, leaked from an unknown source. It showed Lila Moreno in a dim motel room, speaking directly to the camera. Her eyes were tired but steady. "You think I'm the problem?" she said. "You haven't even met the people funding me." Then she smiled faintly. "You will." Marcus watched the clip, his expression unreadable. Somewhere deep inside, he understood. The cracks in the system weren't just lines of corruption. They were fractures running straight through the people trying to fix it. And soon, those cracks were going to break wide open. The neon sign of the Starlight Motel flickered weakly against the Texas night. Half the letters dead, casting the parking lot in an uneasy red glow. Room number 7. That was where Lila Moreno had holed up. The Bureau had been tracing her burner phones for days, and now, every signal, every transaction, every lead pointed here. Marcus Hale stood outside, armored vest on, earpiece humming with chatter from the command team. Elena Vargas adjusted her weapon beside him, her eyes focused, calm under pressure. "We go quiet," she said softly. "No SWAT lights. No shouting. She's cornered. And a cornered woman doesn't think. She reacts." Marcus nodded, his voice low. "We take her alive. Whatever she knows, it's bigger than this case." Inside room 7, Lila sat on the edge of the bed, the glow from her laptop flickering across her tired face. She was trembling, but her mind was sharp. The television played muted news footage of protests sweeping Houston. People holding signs, chanting for police reform. her name floating like a ghost in the captions below. On the table lay a pistol, a burner phone, and a folded photograph of her son. She stared at it for a long time, whispering to herself, "Just one more day. Baby, I promise." Then, she picked up the phone and dialed a number she'd sworn never to call. Marcus Hale's. When his phone vibrated, Marcus froze. Unknown number. He murmured. Elena's gaze snapped toward him. "Don't answer." But he already had. "Agent Hale," he said, his tone steady. On the other end. Lila's voice trembled between fear and resolve. "You're outside, aren't you?" "Lila," he said. "It's over. Don't make this worse." She laughed bitterly. "Worse? You think this started with me? You think it ends with an arrest? You have no idea what you're fighting? Then tell me," he urged. "Tell me before someone else gets hurt." There was a pause, heavy and loaded. "Come in alone," she said. "No agents, no backup, or I disappear again." Elena shook her head furiously when Marcus relayed the demand. "You go in there alone. She'll kill you or herself. Maybe both." Marcus met her eyes. "We've lost too many chances because we treated her like prey. Maybe if someone just listens, we'll get the truth." Carla's voice came through the comms. "Hale, you step out of formation and I'll have your badge on my desk. Do not engage without protocol." But Marcus had already silenced his earpiece. He moved quietly toward the door of room 7, heart pounding with a rhythm both familiar and dangerous. He'd done undercover work in war zones, faced cartel assassins and corrupt officers. But this was different. This wasn't about guns or money. It was about conscience. He knocked once. "Lila, it's Marcus. I'm unarmed." A pause, then the sound of a latch turning. The door creaked open. The room was dim, the curtains drawn tight. Lila sat across from him, the gun resting on the table but pointed at nothing. "Close the door," she said softly. He did. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. She stared at him, eyes wet but defiant. "Because I thought I could outsmart them. The people funding this network. They don't lose. They pay cops. They pay judges. They pay senators. I moved their money, thinking I could take enough to save my son before they noticed. But they did." Her voice cracked. "They killed my contact in Baton Rouge last week. Evan was supposed to disappear. 2. Marcus's stomach tightened. They already silenced him." She blinked, the pain flickering across her face like lightning. "Then it's just me left." For a moment, the tension softened. Marcus sat down, hands open. "You don't have to die for this," he said. "We can protect you." She gave a bitter smile. "Protect me? You couldn't even protect your own operation." "The system protects itself. Agent Hale, it always does." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small flash drive, tossing it across the table. "Everything's on there. Transactions, offshore accounts, names you won't believe. But once you open it, you'll see the cost. People higher than your badge, higher than mine." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed outside, heavy, fast, wrong. Marcus turned toward the door just as a voice shouted from the parking lot. "FBI, step away!" Elena cursed through the radio. Local police had arrived early, their sirens cutting through the night. Lila panicked, grabbing her gun. "They're here for me!" she cried. Marcus stood quickly, holding out his hands. "Lila, stop! No one's firing! You can still walk out alive!" But the moment was gone. The door burst open, lights flooded the room, and Lila fired. A single shot into the ceiling. Chaos exploded. Officers ducked, shouting commands. Marcus grabbed her wrist, forcing the weapon down. "Lila, look at me!" he shouted. "It's over!" Her eyes were wild, her breath ragged. "You don't understand," she sobbed. "They'll kill my son!" Marcus froze. "Where is he?" She hesitated. whispering, "With my sister, in Austin, but if they find out I talked—" Her words broke off as an officer lunged forward, yanking her arm. "Don't touch her!" Marcus barked. But it was too late. The struggle sent the gun clattering to the floor. Lila fell to her knees, sobbing as agents swarmed the room. "Secure the scene," one shouted. Marcus turned away, frustration burning behind his eyes. Elena entered moments later, face tight. "You disobeyed orders," she said, but her tone wasn't angry, it was weary. "And you saved her life," she added quietly, hours later. The motel was sealed off, yellow tape fluttering in the wind. Lila sat in the back of an FBI van, handcuffed but silent. She stared blankly at the flash drive Marcus now held in his palm. "You'll use it, won't you?" she asked quietly through the open door. Marcus met her gaze. "We'll expose them. That's a promise." She nodded faintly, then leaned back against the seat, eyes closing as if surrender was the only peace left. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Derek Lawson received a call that changed everything. Lawson. "It's Reyes," his captain said. "Navarro made a full confession. You're off suspension, but Internal Affairs still wants your statement. And Hale mentioned you cooperated. That helped." Derek didn't answer right away. "I'm not the same man I was that day." "Captain," he finally said. "Let's hope not," Reyes replied before hanging up, back at the motel. As dawn crept across the cracked pavement, Marcus sat on the hood of the SUV, shoulders heavy. Elena joined him with 2 cups of coffee. "She gave us the truth," she said softly. "Now we have to decide what to do with it." Marcus stared at the horizon, voice low. "Truth doesn't fix the damage. It just reminds us what it cost." His phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. "Come home when you can. Don't lose yourself in their war." He slipped the flash drive into his pocket and looked back at room 7, the curtains fluttering gently in the morning breeze. Somewhere behind them, the system still turned, grinding, indifferent, untouchable. But tonight, he had seen its cracks, and for the first time. Marcus Hale wasn't sure if justice was about winning or surviving long enough to tell the story. The morning after the Starlight Motel raid, Houston felt different. The sun rose behind a haze of smoke from overnight protests, and the city's heartbeat pulsed with outrage, exhaustion, and disbelief. The video of the motel standoff, captured by a bystander across the street, had gone viral by dawn. It showed Lila Moreno, terrified and crying, surrounded by flashing lights, officers shouting, and Marcus Hale stepping forward with his hands raised, begging them to lower their weapons. To most of the world, he was a hero. To others, he was a man who had exposed the ugly machinery behind the badge, and for the FBI. He was both an asset and a liability inside the bureau. Carla Bennett stood at the head of the conference table, reviewing the chaos that followed. The flash drive contains evidence of money transfers involving 2 senators, 3 corporate CEOs, and a law enforcement union fund, she said grimly. If this leaks, it could shatter confidence in every institution tied to this investigation. Marcus stood across from her, exhausted but resolute. "Then maybe it's time something shattered," he said quietly. Carla's expression softened, though her tone stayed firm. "You've done your job, Agent Hale. But this isn't just justice anymore, it's politics. And politics eats truth alive." He didn't argue. He'd seen it happen too many times before. Meanwhile, Derek Lawson sat in the small office of Dr. Amelia Foster, staring at the floor. His uniform was gone, replaced by a simple gray shirt. "They suspended me indefinitely," he said softly. "Public pressure. The department needs someone to blame." Dr. Foster nodded. "Maybe that's a good thing. Sometimes stepping back is the only way forward. He looked up, eyes hollow. I didn't mean to ruin that man's life. You didn't ruin it, she replied gently. You revealed what was broken. In him. In you. In the system. Now you have a choice. Stay bitter. Or start rebuilding. Derek sighed. I don't know where to start. She smiled faintly, admitting that is where it begins. In the detention wing. Lila Moreno sat behind reinforced glass, wrists still bruised from the handcuffs. Elena Vargas entered quietly, setting down a folder. They're offering you a deal, she said. Full cooperation. Witness protection for your son. Lila's eyes flickered with disbelief. After everything? They'll really keep him safe? If you tell them everything you know? Lila leaned back, tears gathering. You think I'm a monster? She whispered. Elena shook her head. No. I think you were desperate, and desperation can turn anyone into something they never meant to be. Lila's voice cracked. Then don't let my son grow up believing I was the villain. Elena placed a gentle hand on the glass. He won't. I'll make sure of it. That evening. Marcus and Elena were back on the highway, heading toward the South Carolina border with a warrant to track one of the offshore operatives tied to the network. The drive was quiet, both of them lost in thought. You ever wonder, Elena said after a while, if we're really fixing anything? Or just exposing new layers of the same corruption? Marcus glanced out the window. Every layer we peel back hurts like hell. But maybe that's the point. Healing never happens without pain. She nodded slowly. You really believe that? I have to, he said. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? 2 days later, in a small coastal town outside Charleston, the Bureau finally cornered the last thread, a warehouse laundering money through shell charities. Lila's cooperation had been invaluable, but when they found her hiding spot empty that morning, they feared the worst. Then came the call. Lila had tried to take her own life in her cell, unable to face the weight of her choices. She survived, barely, and was moved to a secure hospital under constant watch. When Marcus heard, he said nothing for a long time. Finally, he whispered. She wanted to escape, not justice, just the noise. The city of Houston erupted that weekend with the largest protest in a decade. Reverend Isaac Moore stood at the podium, his voice echoing over thousands. We've seen too many names, too many faces, too much silence. Justice isn't just a word, it's a mirror. And right now, America doesn't like what it sees. The crowd roared, cameras rolled. Among the faces was Jordan Tate, now an activist leader, holding a sign that read, "No more blind eyes," for once. The city wasn't divided. It was united by exhaustion and hope. That night, Marcus sat at home with Sophia, the hum of the television filling the quiet. You did what you could, she said softly. Setting a cup of tea beside him, he looked at her, his eyes distant. It doesn't feel like enough. She smiled gently. It never does. But maybe that's how real change starts. One small victory at a time. He nodded, her words sinking deep. On the news. Derek Lawson's face appeared briefly. He had publicly apologized, taking full responsibility for his actions. No badge excuses bias, he'd said at a press conference, voice trembling. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking to do better. When the cameras cut away, Marcus exhaled slowly, as though releasing months of tension. Maybe people can change, he murmured. Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder. You changed him, Marcus, whether you meant to or not. He looked down at the flash drive resting on the table, evidence of everything still hidden, and whispered, then maybe there's hope for all of us. Outside. Thunder rolled softly across the horizon, a Texas storm building in the distance. inside. Marcus Hale finally allowed himself to breathe, not in victory, but in fragile redemption. The world hadn't healed, the system hadn't changed, but somewhere between chaos and conscience, he'd found something worth holding on to, the belief that justice, even when imperfect, still mattered. 3 months later, the echoes of the Houston scandal still rippled across the nation. The video of Marcus Hale's confrontation, the motel standoff, and the revelations from Lila's confession had reshaped everything, from the way the Bureau operated to how the public viewed the balance between justice and power. The headlines had cooled, the protests had quieted, but the changes were real. New oversight policies were passed, community task forces were formed, and the cracks that once divided law enforcement and the people began, slowly, to mend. Yet for those who had lived through the storm, peace came not with applause, but with reflection. Lila Moreno was sentenced in federal court under a plea agreement that ensured her son's safety when she stood before the judge. She didn't plead for mercy. "I've done wrong," she said simply, her voice calm but resolute. "But I wasn't born a criminal. I was made one by a system that looked away until I broke." Her statement spread across the media within hours, sparking both outrage and empathy. Some called her manipulative. Others saw her as a mirror, reflecting a society that punished the desperate but excused the powerful. Marcus watched the coverage from the back of the courtroom, his expression unreadable. As she was led away in handcuffs, she turned slightly, meeting his eyes. It wasn't defiance this time, it was gratitude, quiet and fragile, outside. The courthouse steps were lined with cameras, activists, and citizens holding signs. Among them was Reverend Isaac Moore, standing tall beneath the morning sun. "We don't seek vengeance," he told reporters. "We seek accountability. Justice must be more than a verdict. It must be a promise." His voice, calm yet unwavering, carried through the crowd. It reminded Marcus why he had joined law enforcement in the first place, not for power, not for control, but to restore that promise. Meanwhile, Derek Lawson had started a new chapter of his own, no longer wearing the uniform. He worked as a night security guard at a downtown library. The badge was gone, the authority stripped. But for the first time in years, he felt free of the weight of ego. Every night, as the halls emptied, he would walk past a bulletin board covered in newspaper clippings, many of them about the case that had ended his career. Sometimes he lingered, rereading the stories, tracing the lines of his own downfall. One evening, a janitor, an older man with kind eyes, stopped beside him. "That you in the picture?" he asked. Derek nodded. "Used to be." The man smiled gently. "Used to be means you learned something. Some folks never do." Derek returned the smile faintly. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I guess I did." At the FBI field office, Elena Vargas flipped through the latest report on the dismantled laundering network. 3 major arrests in 2 months, she said, handing the file to Marcus. "Looks like we finally closed the book." He nodded but didn't smile. "We closed a book," he corrected. "Not the book." She sighed, understanding. "You still think there's more?" He glanced out the window toward the city below. "There's always more. Corruption doesn't die. It just changes clothes." She leaned against the desk, studying him. "You ever get tired of fighting ghosts?" He turned to her, eyes steady. "Every day. But stopping isn't an option." Later that week, Marcus attended a community forum organized by Reverend Moore, a gathering of police officers, activists, and citizens to discuss reform. The auditorium was filled, yet the atmosphere was calm, almost hopeful. When Marcus stepped up to the microphone, the room fell silent. "I've worn 2 uniforms in my life," he began. One as a police officer, one as an FBI agent. Both taught me how easy it is to lose sight of the people we're supposed to protect. Justice isn't about who has power. It's about who has conscience. And sometimes, the hardest justice isn't in punishing others, it's in confronting ourselves. The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was sincere, steady, and heavy with understanding. That night, back home, Marcus sat on the porch with his wife Sophia. The air was still, the city quiet under a sky full of stars. She rested her head on his shoulder. "You ever think about leaving it all behind?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "Every day. But then I think about the ones who can't." She looked up at him, eyes warm with pride. "You've changed more than you realize." He shook his head gently. "No, Sophia, the world changed me. I just listened. Across town, a memorial candlelight vigil took place outside the courthouse, a tribute to victims of corruption, bias, and injustice. Jordan Tate was there too, camera in hand, capturing the moment that had started with a single video months ago. As the candles flickered, he panned the camera across the faces, black, white, brown, young, old, all standing together. "This," he whispered to himself, "is what justice looks like when people refuse to stay silent." When dawn came, the world felt a little lighter. The system wasn't perfect. It never would be. But for once, people were talking, learning, rebuilding. Derek walked the quiet library halls with a small sense of peace. Lila's son started a new life far from the city, safe and unburdened. And Marcus Hale returned to his desk at the bureau, where a new file awaited, another case, another story, another chance to do it right. He looked at the photo pinned to the board beside his desk, the one from that night at the supermarket, the moment everything began. He remembered Derek's shouting, the stares, the humiliation, and the chaos that followed. But now, when he looked at it, he didn't see anger. He saw change, messy, painful, necessary change, one fight at a time. He whispered to himself, as the first rays of morning light touched his office window. Marcus exhaled slowly. Justice wasn't a destination. It was a journey, and he was still walking it. And though the road ahead would be long and uncertain, for the first time in years, he believed that maybe, just maybe, humanity was learning to see itself clearly in the mirror of justice. Thank you for watching this story until the end. If it moved you, take a moment to support our work, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who believes in justice and compassion. Your voice helps these stories live on.